I'm Wendy Chamberlain. I'm president of the Middle East Institute, and it is again, for the third time, my great pleasure to welcome all of you to the Middle East Institute's third now annual conference on Egypt. We're always looking forward at MEI to this conference every year because we make a point of bringing prominent voices, prominent leaders, decision makers, and opinion leaders from Egypt to Washington to sit on panels with American experts and academics to grapple with some of the more pressing problems that face Egypt today and face U.S. relations with Egypt. We've got a terrific lineup of speakers. I know you know that because you all have been attracted to this, and it looks like a full room. We're going to be looking at some of the more difficult issues that face Egypt today. How do you invigorate a civil society, which is so necessary for a balanced and prosperous economy, society? How do you balance the need for stability and security with social justice? And then very importantly, how do you stimulate the Egyptian economy to create all those jobs for the youth bulge and for a prosperous Egypt? All of these issues are enormously important for us here in the United States because Egypt is such an important ally of ours and because Egypt is really the tall pole in the tent for the entire region. So we all want very much for Egypt to succeed. Dealing and discussing with these issues is what we do at the Middle East Institute, and it is so important to all of us. We are fortunate today to have a very experienced and seasoned moderator for the first panel on the domestic political situation. I think you know the campaign started, when, yesterday or the day before in Egypt for the parliamentary elections. Doyle McManus was a veteran Washington commentator and writer for the Los Angeles Times. He's covered the White House. I first met him years ago at the State Department, which he covered. He's an award-winning journalist, and he will be guiding the first panel's discussion. So Doyle, let me turn it over to you to introduce our panelists and conduct the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wendy, and thank you all for coming out this morning. And Wendy, you neglected to mention what I consider still the high point of my career, which was when I was covering the Middle East. I was living in Beirut back then, not in Cairo, but I did get a chance to visit Egypt often. This is a splendid and distinguished panel that we have today to discuss the state of politics and internal security in Egypt. You know them, you have their full biographies, but I still can't resist saying a few things about each of them in turn. Gameela Ismail is a leading member of the Al-Dostour party, a former journalist who became an activist for human rights during the Mubarak government, took a leading role in the January 25th revolution, and is a co-founder of both the organization Egyptian Women for Change and, with Mohammed Baradei, the Al-Dostour party. Ezzat Ibrahim Youssef is the managing editor of Al-Ahram, which all of you know. He's been a distinguished reporter in both Washington and Cairo. He has been a fellow at Brookings and Yale. And in case you're not familiar with newspaper titles, the managing editor is the one who does all the work. Dr. Toma is a psychiatrist and behavioral therapist. She specializes in the rehabilitation of victims of torture and abuse. She also was a participant in the revolution of January 25. She is a co-founder of the Kazaboun campaign. Kazaboun, of course, means liars, which is an interesting blend of journalism and social activism. It has exposed misconduct by every government since 2011, and she was a founder of the Social Democratic Party. And Nathan Brown, known to every Washingtonian who follows the Middle East, director of the Institute for Middle East Studies at the Elliott School at George Washington, and president of the Middle East Studies Association. All of us, friends of Egypt, Egyptians, Americans, others, have watched history unfold in Egypt over the last 5 years. We've seen a revolution, an election, a government that failed, a coup, a harsh security crackdown, a presidential election, a continued security crackdown, now a modicum of order and economic recovery, and a scheduled election that begins in mid-October, something Egypt hasn't, an election for parliament, which is something Egypt hasn't had for 3 years. So as the title of our session puts it, Egypt is caught between politics and internal security, and in the next 90 minutes, I hope to understand, with the help of our panel, much better where Egypt is going. So let me begin by asking Gameela Ismail, as you look as a leader in one of the parties that is that's participating in this parliamentary election, as you look at that election.
It's not participating in this.
It's not participating in the election, thank you. What are your hopes? What are your expectations?
Well, in the beginning, I'd like to thank the Middle East Institute for hosting this event and for choosing this very interesting, very sensitive issue. I'd like to thank Ambassador Chamberlain and Kate and yourself and everyone who made this thing happen here. And I also would like to request the media present in reporting to kindly take me in the context. I'm a mother of 2 young men, and also I'm sort of a mother to some thousands of young men and women in Egypt who wants me back, and my sons want me home. So I would very kindly request you and request myself to be also careful while tackling this issue here. I want to sort of wrap up in a quick wrap up how the situation is today politically in Egypt. I had to resort actually before I try to wrap up to this book here of Edgar Morin, the French philosopher, who wrote Où va le monde? Where is the world going? So where is Egypt going is actually a very uncertain moment. And it's amid all of this uncertainty and ambiguity and fears, we are all sort of trapped in a shell, an eggshell, floating on the waters of a very deep ocean. We all have fears, including the authority. We all have hopes, including the authority. We all have violence that's rooted inside us against each other. But we all think that this is not the moment for collision. Maybe later, but not now. If this happens now, this shell is going to be very fragile and scatter, and therefore we will be in the middle of a very big crisis, really. In this shell, you will find a dinosaur, which has a big paranoia regarding the security. This dinosaur would like to protect the state, would like to defend the state, and while doing this, it can even step on its own eggs or its own children. On the other hand, you have another legendary monster. Sometimes it's called terrorism, and sometimes it's called the Muslim Brothers, and maybe some other names, depending. And this monster, again, is very threatening because for some reason there is feelings of retaliation in order to come back and regain their lost political opportunity. So in the middle of both the monster and the dinosaur lies a big wide stream of Egyptians who really want to have a better future, lies also the dynamic bloc, which maybe myself and some of the panelists here represent, who were able to produce the change that happened back in 2011, and a big, wide number of youth, very promising ones, who have big hopes that they can draw a smile on the face of this country, together with a very beautiful country that has unprecedented places where you never heard of, because the scene that's always in the news is terrorism and military confrontation, while we have a beautiful country and a beautiful people to look forward to the future for. So we are all trapped in this. The dinosaur has media alongside and has also part of the judiciary, and basically this dinosaur state has its security. These three wings, actually, they believe genuinely that they are defending the state from collapsing, so they do anything and everything to defend the state. They do anything and everything to confront this monster which represents terrorism.
And so you are caught in between
the
dinosaur and the monster.
Yeah, yeah.
How do you open political space? How do you make that uncomfortable situation better?
Well, this is a very difficult question, because we are still thinking of how can we get around all this without sort of colliding with those two entities, and how can we also bring about any political impact at the moment outside the parliament? How can we help this country, help the society to find sort of promising initiatives and projects and so on, to go ahead without losing hope in this very long path that those two entities are taking. And definitely there will be no losers to the end and no victorious to the end, but a long battle that we all will suffer from.
Now, tell us why the Dostour Party, the Constitution Party, decided not to participate in this election.
The the Dostour Party, together with most of the democratic parties that were established post-revolution, they had several reasons to boycott or withdraw, depending on the position of each. We have decided to boycott early in January, when we discovered that the elections law is not fair enough. We discovered that there will be security restrictions and selection in a way. And we also have a terrible dilemma in terms of we are a party that has thousands of very young members between 18 and 35, and we have been targeted throughout the past 2 years by detaining, imprisonment, and putting our young members to trial. So we have been caught in this trap. Actually, just a few days ago, we had this very positive sign whereby the president pardoned some of them. However, there are so many others in prison. And talking to the members about the elections and trying to convince them that, we have to do this, we have to do that, and go and run for campaigns amidst this very tight security grip, and with their friends and colleagues in jail, is a luxury.
So, in your view, can this parliament, if it's elected in October and November, successfully have any real legitimacy for the Egyptian people?
Well, in the upcoming parliament, we'll have a new layer of politicians. They are all selected by a security officer who is General Saif al-Yazal, former General Saif al-Yazal. The security expert decided to select those politicians or candidates, even though they do not have political experience or legislative experience, but they are an extension, more or less, to the old Mubarak's patron, the tailoring pattern which we used to to make your clothes with. Without Mubarak and without his direct figures, but it's sort of a continuation to what used to happen. Selecting and choosing candidates according to money they have, according to their relation and confidence and trust between them and between the authorities, and they're coming from families and tribes and places where they can also have popularity among. So with this new political layer that's being produced in this upcoming election, would they be able to deliver what they are calling for? They call for stability. I mean, they are saying we are going to bring about stability to the country. We are going to eliminate terrorism and whoever backs terrorism, and we are going to offer a better life. So we really wish they can do this. We wish they can do it.
Ezzat Ibrahim, you've been writing about this process in your column in Al-Ahram. So where do you see this parliamentary election taking the political order?
First of all, I would like to thank the leadership of Middle East Institute for reaching me out with the invitation. I think it's, as Mr. Gameela said, that we passing through a very crucial time, that this is the last stage of the roadmap. And at the same time, we have some sort of uncertainty about some issues. But I think it's, from what she said, that we have a chance, in my opinion, to make some advancement on the political process. It depends on the, agree that we need some initiatives to move forward. That initiatives can come from the president himself, can come from the political class around him, but keeping this political parties in misery and that situation is quite harmful for the country. I believe that, as you said, that I wrote in my article on Monday about this new majority in Parliament, which is shaped by a coalition of individuals that come into Parliament from different, all shades of political aspect from Alexandria to Aswan, that you have actually independents who might come with a political party or something like that in the new parliament. That, I think it's because of that will be funded by businessmen, that will be funded by their own family is there to stay. That I think since before the revolution, 1952, the family is still a very important component of the political process in Egypt. What happened in 2012 gave them a lesson to move to back again, consolidate their ties, and back to parliament. I think it's normal. It happens everywhere, that especially in societies like us. So the question is how to deal with something like that. I think it's this parliament will be a burden on the president himself. It's not, I disagree with the idea that will be easy, that a parliament or a composition that he can deal easily with them. Because it's, they will try to, there will be a self-interest personal, serving their own interest. So I'm talking about these individual seats, individual candidates. So the president can face the dilemma of that he needs to show his own social biases here, that he needs to his government to defend the interest of poor and middle classes. That will, I think, will put more burdens on his shoulders.
So you're describing a parliament that almost sounds like the NDP parliaments under Mubarak, only without a formal NDP structure. Is that an accurate picture?
I think it's because of this family clans and family and the clan ties that you have almost, according to statistics that we gathered from the field, that something like 1,000 from the almost 6,000 coming from the hierarchical positions in the NDP. That means that from the committee's leadership to the senior positions in the former ruling party. I think that means but it doesn't mean that they will reflect the NDP policies, because the NDP was used to be a gathering or a party for special interest or people who is seeking their own interest that disappeared, vanished after the revolution. What I'm saying that you have you have different camps here. You have businessman camp, the businessman supporting also some political parties, and they have most of media in Egypt in their hands, and some of them will fund candidates in parliament. And I think this situation is quite. I think it's not easy to deal with something like that, and you need to find a formula that to represent the core of the interest of average Egyptians. One aspect is that I think it's about the constitution and the reality of the new parliament, that we will have a quasi-parliamentary system that we have in the constitution already. At the same time, we will have a majority of individuals. So, and the parliamentary system, that we need to have a majority that based on partisan politics, but we don't have parties. So this is, I think, a dilemma that we will face when Parliament convenes. That we will face this fragmentation, and maybe they will find someone to get people together to form a new coalition or a new party, because you need someone to refer laws and to get people to introduce new laws. I think, in my opinion, we have two challenges here for the president, that he needs to send all these laws that issued in the last couple of years, that more than 400 laws to Parliament to be ratified in 15 days, which is impossible, of course. But so there will be some sort of agreement that they will ratify it all in all, and after that we'll refer it to committees to discuss it and to maybe to make some changes. And that will, I think, the law, the anti-terrorism law, the protest law, and other laws that will be important to be present to Parliament in early January.
And let me just quickly ask the same question I asked Gameela Ismail. A parliament elected that fits the description you've given us, with many of most really of the parties that grew up after the revolution deciding not to participate. How much legitimacy can that parliament have in the eyes of the Egyptian people?
I don't think it's the matter of who participates in the elections. We have more than 92, up to 92 political parties, but the turnout is very important. I think the turnout in this case, that people is losing confidence in politics, in party politics. The people see all these quarrels and divisions among political parties, and at the same time, the popularity of the president and the people who trust Sisi more than any other political figure in the country. I'm talking about the majority, and this is the mood in the country in general. That will, I think, that will lead to some sort of a low turnout in the elections. This turnout, I think, that will be more beneficial for people who are on the constitution and the constituencies, that the level of voting that will push, that you can go back again to the old bribes that you can pay for to get something like 5,000, 10,000 votes in a small constituency. I think this is very problematic, that you can see a member of parliament that was totally separate from the interest of his own people, because the people who will vote for him, that he will he can mobilize people who is close to him, close to his family, close to his clan.
Dr. Toma, you've described yourself as a boycotter. You were a boycotter early. You're boycotting this process. Why?
Still going on strong, I guess. I'm a religious boycotter, so since 2011 from the first referendum. But anyway, also I'd like to start by saying a few things, and I'll get to that. Thank you for having us, first of all. And Mrs. Gameela Ismail, she said that she's the mother. She is. So I'd like to say that she's the mother of many. Unfortunately, she's the mother of many who have been killed, mother of many who are detained, the mother of many who are being prosecuted now for fighting for freedom. So that's just to clarify that. So we want her home safe, of course, so we can continue together. She also resorted to a book, and I'd like to resort to a book as well. My book would be 1984, because I think we live in Orwellian Egypt. We have a Ministry of Truth, we have Ministry of Love, Ministry of Truth that is responsible for the propaganda and the revisionism and everything you can imagine, and Ministry of Love that tortures us to death, practically. Besides all that, we have a Big Brother, and Big Brother is watching us all the time. So maybe this can summarize a bit of what Egypt is looking like to me, but I keep on hoping that we don't have the end of Winston Smith. So I keep on thinking that maybe we will not reach the demise, and we will continue. I'd like to use two stories, very quick ones, to just say, the situation currently for my people. When I say my people, are the people who actually believed in January 25. They are not Muslim Brotherhood, they are not pro-military, they're just Egyptians who believed in change and the need for change. The story of the wall, that's Muhammad Mahmud is a street. It is famous for its clashes, and it's like an epic for us. In 2012, September 2012, during Morsi, the police forces actually started washing the walls from the graffiti and everything that told our story. What happened quickly is that we rushed quickly into the streets, and we prevented this from happening, and we were strong enough to do that. Last week, the same thing happened, and it started to happen, but unfortunately, we couldn't rush to the streets and prevent that because we couldn't. The only thing we could do is actually post some stuff on Facebook or on Twitter, because most of us are fearing the protest law or the terror law that now will be used also against Facebook pages, believe it or not. So that says something about Egypt. The last thing is Tito and his brother. This is a good story. Tito is facing charges, two different charges. One of them is attacking the headquarters of the Muslim Brotherhood during some clashes we had with the Muslim Brotherhood. And the other charges were belonging to the Muslim Brotherhood. So that says something about our judiciary system. His brother, 2 years ago, went on January 25, just wearing a T-shirt, anti-torture, and he was 15 at the time, I think. He's been detained for 2 years now, and the trial is still going on without even proper charges. So that says something as well. Just to say now about the roadmap here, yeah, even if I'm a boycotter, even if I don't believe, I think people chose the CC route at this moment. They chose the roadmap, and the final part of the roadmap would be the elections, yes. But about turnout, we just don't want to forget that the turnout for the CC elections themselves were really low, to the extent that on the TV had to come up and ask people to actually go out and vote, and they were actually threatened to be penalized if they don't. So that says something. The youth don't go to the boxes. And I think I don't only speak of from my perspective, but from many, that the only box so far we believe in that belongs to the revolution is a coffin. Okay, so that's the problem. We don't have faith in boxes. We don't have faith in a Western notion of democracy that is instilled in Egypt without any democratic institutions whatsoever. You can't start having votes and elections without having democratic institutions, judiciary or security forces, or even a civil society that's working. So that's why I boycott. And I think that's why I'll continue to boycott, even if people are choosing this route. Maybe the only thing I would hope for, knowing that it will be rigged as usual, having many individuals more than lists means that they will be handpicked by security, as Ms. Gameela said. So the only hope I have is for it to be rigged enough to cause a bit of rage, perhaps, And the only problem also we have is that the protest law would mean that any parliament that comes, this can be a double-edged sword, You cannot protest against it if you don't like it, if security is happy with it, or you can actually protest against it if Sisi decides he doesn't want this parliament. So.
Now, just because you've been boycotting doesn't mean you've been inactive.
Yeah.
You've been very active in trying to build new organizations of civil society. Talk about that a little bit, and are you feeling the space for your activities get any bigger, get smaller? What has your experience been over the past year?
Okay. I think when we launched Kazibun, which is the Liars campaign, and the idea was that we were screening the lies of the military council, and after it, the Muslim Brotherhood as well in the streets of Egypt. We were trying to be the alternative media because media is controlled, of course, as we all know, a bit like here and everywhere. So it tells people what governments want them to know. So Kazibun succeeded in 2012 in actually mobilizing a lot of people against the military council, and a lot of changes happened because of that. We did the same with Muslim Brotherhood, and now we can't. So we can't screen anymore any violations. We can't talk about anyone because we will be beaten up. We have citizen police. We have Big Brother, as I said, so it's not possible. But what we started doing now instead is that we've been thinking maybe the only hope for civil society or whatever we can do now is actually survive. And the way we tried to survive before was all of us being in one ship, trying to go to, to get to the shores of freedom. I think we decided it's not possible anymore because they're going to bomb us all and we'll all sink. So we decided to go into little boats, different boats, but with the same goal, heading towards this shore of freedom, working on different things. So we can work on health, you can work on education, on police reform, on whatever it is, while trying to survive and not be seen that much by Big Brother and getting there. Perhaps also preparing the youth for an alternative. We have a problem too, so it's not only the authority. We have a problem that we don't have real opposition and we don't have real youth, to be real politicians. I will not be the person, seeing change. Perhaps we call ourselves, the keepers of the flame. What we can do now is keep it going and alive and prepare the younger ones, to be in charge and get fresh blood one day, but not at the current state. So the current state is just survive, build yourself, continue with different initiatives, not only Molotovs. It's not gonna help. We're all in prison for that, I guess. So that's what we've been working on recently and will continue to do.
Nathan Brown, I'm going to ask you to bring us back to the parliamentary election. Do you expect this election to be a step forward, a step backward, or a step sideways?
Probably a step sideways, maybe a little bit backwards. I mean, I'm listening to this. I'm the only non-Egyptian on the panel, and my first impulse, if I listen just to the surface comments, would be I'm hearing two different Egypts, right? One in which you're going to have a rubber stamp parliament, the other which you're going to have a parliament which is a burden on the presidency. I actually think if you listen closely, and I listen closely to my fellow panelists because they're worth listening to, you're actually hearing some consistency here about what the parliament will look like, and I think why that will be a problem. The parliament is not going to be a very well-organized body. It's going to be a collection of individuals. Everybody agrees on that. Why that is, it's partly because of the law itself, it's partly because of the general political atmosphere, and it's partly because Egypt does not have political parties in the electoral sense. It has legal entities that are political parties, but the ability to go out and actually organize and deliver on election day is something that is just not possible in the current environment. So what you're going to have is what I call, and I hesitate to say this because I think it wouldn't translate well into Arabic, but a parliament of cats. Okay, you're going to have basically a lot of individuals who are there because of their individual standing, but who are going to be very difficult to herd in any particular direction. That is going to be a problem, and the reason it's going to be a problem, one as Ibrahim Youssef already mentioned, Egypt has been essentially ruled by decree, by the military, by Morsi, by Abdel Mansour, and now by Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, basically, with a brief exception, since the early 2011. So the parliament will get in with an enormous number of fairly substantial decree laws, which it is required by the Constitution to review and approve. So you're going to be giving it to this body. It's going to be larger than any Egyptian parliament in the past. It's going to be inexperienced, and it's going to be a bunch of individuals, and they're going to have to do this right away. That's going to be one problem. There's a second, and that's already beginning to get some attention. But essentially, I think the parliament will be very, very heavily pressured to approve this all as a body, which could be an ugly process. The second, which has gotten much less attention, is something that initially looks salutary in the new constitution, and that is that Egypt has a special category of laws called laws complementing the Constitution. The Constitution defers an awful lot to ordinary legislation, organizing the press, the police, and so on. And those laws that are mentioned in the Constitution require a supermajority of the parliament to pass. Those laws are already generally on the books, governing these things, but they were written under authoritarian regimes. So Egypt has a very authoritarian legal framework. To change that, if the parliament actually did have some interest in doing so, would be very, very difficult with a parliament like that. There's no way I think you'll have difficulty getting a majority in parliament, much less a supermajority in order to modify any of Egypt's authoritarian legislative framework. So I think what you're likely to see is a parliament in which you will have individuals who will become expert at making noise. Parliaments can talk, but very, very poor at making legislation. And so the phrase actually, a burden on the presidency, is, I think, how the political leadership of the country will come to see it. This parliament will be a pain to deal with. It will be in this non-ideological body, but that will simply be an obstruction, and one that will be negative rather than positively useful.
And is there anyone around President Sisi, or does President Sisi himself see these weaknesses in the parliament that we're about to see, see them as weaknesses rather than as assets?
I think that there are some indications, if you follow Egyptian press discussions, that they've finally woken up to the structure that they have created, and that there is even talk of amending the Constitution before it's been completely enacted. I think that would be politically difficult. It's not impossible. You referred to a recreation of the NDP-dominated parliament. And I think I would agree here that what you're not going to see necessarily a reconstruction of the NDP. President Sisi doesn't seem to be all that interested in party building or doing electoral politics or normal politics or building some kind of organized constituency. But I think what we'll see instead will be a parliament that's regarded as I say, as an annoyance to deal with, but one in which the presidency still has enough tools and key state institutions have enough insulation from the parliament that they'll probably keep on doing what they've been already doing before the election of the parliament, unless the parliament shows some kind of backbone, which would surprise most observers.
Now, you've done some very distinguished scholarly work on the Muslim Brotherhood. So bring us up to date. We've seen signs of a divide, a generational divide in the Brotherhood, radicalization of younger members. Where does the Muslim Brotherhood go from here?
The Brotherhood is simply outside of this process, and that's not in my mind, healthy for Egyptian politics. If you go back to the reemergence of the Brotherhood in the 70s and 80s, there was a trend within the movement that was never dominant, but it was powerful, about participating in political life. The Brotherhood as a whole was a little bit ambivalent about running in elections and that sort of thing, because they said, well, look, we're about more than politics. Some people said within the Brotherhood said that. And others said, what's the point of participating in cooked elections? But by and large, the faction within the Brotherhood that was politically oriented became more and more influential. There's no inclination right now in the Brotherhood to participate in politics. None. I mean, they would say that the door has been slammed in their face, they've been banned, they've been tortured, they've been arrested, they've been killed, they've been exiled. But whatever, they are now dedicated to what they're calling a revolutionary path. You mentioned some split in the Brotherhood, and I think what I would say is a little bit different. There's tension within the Brotherhood. An awful lot of the attention from outside observers focuses on the issue of violence. To what extent are they going to go down a violent path? And there is certainly discussion within the Brotherhood about that. The response you'll hear from Brotherhood people is the violence is being perpetrated on us. The only question is, do we hit back? That's how they will present it. But the real debate within the Brotherhood is actually, I think, not so much about violence. A better way to understand it is a debate about the nature of the organization itself. You've got an older generation that really valued the Muslim Brotherhood as an organization. So we have to keep this organization going at all costs. We have to make compromises. We have to be cautious. We can't alienate the regime too much. And you've got a younger generation within the movement younger members who simply didn't grow up in that kind of environment and are more dedicated to this new revolutionary path and say, maybe the Brotherhood won't survive as we know it. Maybe we have to take risks. The Brotherhood is a famously cautious organization. And so the real kind of tensions within the Brotherhood, I think, have to do with how much to defer to that old image of, or that old model, the way of doing things, and how much even the old hierarchy of the Brotherhood is one that will serve the organization well, how much instead to go to a much more decentralized model. Those are the kinds of tensions that are really going on. What there is, I think, within most of the organization is a consensus on what they call a revolutionary path. Revolutionary, very vaguely defined, but essentially the Brotherhood right now says, we're not about taking positions in the Egyptian state anymore. We're about overthrowing the state. And that is a recipe, I think, for continued civil conflict within Egypt.
And a perhaps naive question, does revolutionary mean violent?
For some people, yes, and for some people, no. And the formulaic response you will get from Brotherhood members is the Brotherhood is dedicated to a revolutionary path. It does not endorse violence. Of course, people are free to defend themselves. And from some senior members, they will say things like, look, if I've got a young member whose sister has been raped or whose friend has been shot dead, what am I supposed to tell him to do? And the amount to which you hear what you could refer to, I think, as a flashing yellow light from top leaders, and just the amount of anger within Brotherhood ranks, I think, is actually increasing.
And that brings us to the question of security and the security crackdowns, and I want to do a quick round with each of you on that, and then we will go to our patient audience for questions. Gameela, I loved your picture of the dinosaur and the monster. So we've described the dinosaur a bit, we've described the monster a bit. If you were to advise President Sisi, if he called you on the phone, said, come over, I know we don't want to continue a security crackdown like this forever, but I'm afraid to lift it now. Where do I start? What are the first 2 or 3 things I might do to move Egypt back to a more normal place? And do you think there's any appetite on the part of the president and the people around him for that kind of discussion?
Well, first of all, I just want to make a very quick comment on your analysis. Part of the tension that you did not mention is that the young generation of the Muslim Brothers, exactly like the young generation of generations in Egypt, the young generations of the Muslim Brother believe that they were misled by the leaders and that they were given as a sacrifice, again, by their leaders, being left in Rab'a square and urged to stay. They also believe that if their leaders want to make a decision for reconciliation or for ending this, they will never commit to what their leaders will do. Because they feel that the leaders are doing this for political opportunities, while they would not do this because, as he said, as you said, they want to go ahead with the revolutionary path. So this is just a quick addition. Regarding the security and the President Sisi, I just want to say that regarding the parliament, I know that this parliament is going to be a burden, like Mr. Ezzat said, for the president, because I also know that the president and the regime, people around him as well, they don't really think that the parliament is important at the moment. I think they're doing this just to continue the roadmap and to continue a path that they have to continue pour la forme and for the international community. But do they really and genuinely believe that this parliament can add something or can do something? I don't think that they believe in that. And this reflects so much in the media, because in the media started very early in defaming even parliamentarians that are running under this list called In Love with Egypt, and also defaming and distorting the image of others who could run against this list, as those are the people who love Egypt and in love with Egypt, and those are the people who are betraying Egypt or hate Egypt. So going forward, the media is also working on the fact that if this parliament is not going to have patriotic Egyptians and people who will do what the president wants, then it's going to be dissolved and stuff like that. So I honestly don't believe that he genuinely and the people around him genuinely feel that the parliament is important, and definitely it's going to be a burden. And as Dr. Sally said, one of my fears of being in this parliament, I'm not running, but one of my fears was, what if they use this protest tool and, you know, stepping in or out, if you make any different toned decisions, you can be trapped among big masses of people who believe that you are against the president and that you are betraying your country. So it's a very confusing scene, really. As for the security and the monster and the dinosaur state, again, I don't think that President Sisi or the people around him would consult someone like me, because
I wanted to give them the chance whether they would do it or not.
Yeah, because I mean, I've seen, for instance, an artist, a singer, a very famous singer, in one of the big meetings, when he raised the issue of Ala Abdel Fattah with President Sisi, although the president really likes Mohammed Munir, the singer, he told him, no, these are more dangerous than the Muslim Brothers. And Ala Abdel Fattah, he belongs to 25th of January, and he's not a Muslim Brothers, and I mean, he's one of the very important activists. So, and this was an artist, a singer who's giving, or who has a request from the president. I don't think really that, and I think this is in the culture of the military, as I understand, I don't think that they really think that we politicians can do something good for the country, or can maybe bring about some good initiatives, or we are trusted at all. I think they have lots of suspicions and lots of fears regarding us. And this is why, until this minute, even though the parliament is meant to be so homogeneous, with this list and with those selected parliamentarians or candidates, I think the state has lots of fears every day regarding leakage. Leaks are the big fear that they have now. Maybe this person is going to pass and to be in the parliament, or maybe this person is going to be there. They are really, they really fear what's going to happen. So it's not fear only among us, but among also the authority of people like us.
Ezzat Ibrahim, is it too early to talk about, is it too early to hope for a relaxation of the security crackdown?
Well, actually, when you talk about the crackdown, we have to differentiate between different security campaigns happening in Egypt. And so you have, which is also controversial in international media, that we have the campaign in Sinai to free Sinai from this extremism. These groups that some of them are franchise of the ISIS. Also, I think it's before talking to people from the state security apparatus, they were talking about that we meant to decrease the attrition against the police officers, policemen in the streets after Rab'a, or because feeling that policemen were exhausted and they want to put an end to this, not to start again a demonstration like what happened in 2011, 2012 against the military. So they believe that for some time that you need to do something like that. And on all our interviews in the last maybe 5 or 6 months in Al-Ahram, they were talking about that they started a human rights department in the Ministry of Interior, and they moving to release more people in the future. That happened last week. And maybe that will create more to stop this polarization in the society. Because I think it's away from the crackdown, that you have also the idea that the state or the government is focusing on the needs of people more, and they think that people is not keen or are not interested in to follow what's going on in the street from demonstration or something like that. So I think it's I need just to complete to continue on the issue of government. I think it's before talking about the parliament, we need to know what's going on after the new government. That the president asking the new prime minister to start or to write a program that will be submitted to the parliament in early January. That means that we are that might be starting a new dialogue in the society about what is the priorities of the new government, what's the priorities of the new parliament. But at the same time, I think that the security issue is going down in the interest of average Egyptians.
Dr. Salih Toma, President Sisi isn't going to telephone you and ask your advice, but I want to find out what your advice is anyway.
Actually, he did several times, but I don't pick up. Anyway, so yeah, I just want to say that, first of all, this systematic crackdown actually means fear. It means fear from the side of the authorities and the very strong will to reach a totalitarian state, anyway. So that's to be clear on that. I write about violence in general. I write about violence, trauma, and transitional justice. And we have a very funny ministry in Egypt. It's called Transitional Justice. And this ministry is actually there to just justify all sorts of atrocities. Following the Rabaa massacre, and I do call it massacre, and following the coup, what happened is that I was approached by the foreign ministry to join the delegation coming to the UN here to defend all sorts of things. It would be great to have a Christian Egyptian, on board and all that. So, of course, I declined and I refused. This did not only happen to me. They also, different ministers approached different activists. And the idea was, that Sisi is reaching out and he wants us involved. And what we've been told consistently is that he has not full control over the security forces and the security situation in Egypt, especially state security. So, when, state security has an issue as well of vendetta, and it's a bit of a sort of a personal one. They went into hiding on the 28th of January, and afterwards it was a personal issue. So it's not just anti-MB, it's specifically anti those who went out on February 28th. Most of us are subjected to smearing, rape, torture, imprisonment, all sorts of things. And I'm not sure how much Sisi is aware of all that, but it's definitely happening from a security perspective. If he calls me, I'll tell him that violence breeds violence, and that the war on terror justifies all these atrocities, and I guess this needs to stop. We have become a very violent nation. It is a polarized one. You cannot speak in public transport now. It is that bad. It's just like Eastern Europe in some aspects, because someone is going to just hand you over to the police, or they would beat you up, or anything of that sort. So I guess it's an issue as well of if violence breeds violence, and if I am like the daughter or the son of an imprisoned or a killed or a raped or whatever, what do you expect of me? So the article I'm writing currently actually is the school of Fanon, of violence versus non-violence, if we are talking about struggle, because it is not a colon, it's like we are not occupied, but it seems that there are different forces that are not in harmony, so we are still in conflict. And the idea is, how do you expect any sort of reconciliation if trauma is continuing to happen, if violence and atrocities are continuing to take place? So if he wants peace and if he wants things to settle, then violence needs to stop. And it needs to stop first from the one with more power, which is the authorities. And not only stop, then we can talk, then actually, some reparation or retribution can take place. But on top of all that, you also have a very unjust judiciary system that also, allows for the breeding of more violence. Because if I can't get, closure through the judiciary system for myself being raped or tortured or whatever thing took place since Rabaa or even before, then of course I might resort to violence. And if you're still continuing to tag me as a terrorist every time I speak just because I'm opposition, then you are also breeding the violence within the society towards me. So I think it's going to explode very soon, because violence is there. We don't tackle it as much. And I think for his own sake, he really needs to address the security issue. And I don't think he has full control over it, because if he had, then he would be talking police reform instead of saying police officers are very exhausted, instead of saying that police officers are the ones who actually got the raise after January 25. We got no raises anywhere. No other government employee or anything, got a better social justice, whatever thing that we were calling for, except for police officers. And that says a lot as well. And judges have been always taking, because judges is like, they rule. So it's judges and army officers, of course, that we have no access to their budget. We know nothing. And I think also something I want to add, which is important, the fact that all this bloodshed and violence that is not coming out to the West, and people continue to support Sisi, or governments continue to support Sisi without even discussing human rights violations, is going to promote it more. As a Christian, I'd like to say that I was offended by my own Pope, to be honest, okay? Because my own Pope, who supports Sisi, came out and said, this is not the time to talk about human rights because we are in war, war on terror. And what happened, and will continue to happen, is that the retaliation will happen against the Christians themselves. So the Pope will go out and say things like that, and that will apply to all Christians, of course, and it will increase the tension between Christians and Muslims just because our Pope is supporting Sisi in this manner.
Nathan Brown, if I heard Ezzat Ibrahim accurately, I think he was describing a president who wants order, who wants stability, but who also wants to look for ways to decrease polarization, maybe even look for ways to decrease official violence. Does that fit with your view of where the government is? And do you think Sisi has full control of the security apparatus?
I think that he simply doesn't have the tools or the skills to manage politically, right? This is a security-oriented regime, and that's where they start. And they see these as primarily as security problems. We heard the Egyptian state here described as a paranoid dinosaur and as 1984. I wouldn't go as far in either regard, but I think the functional equivalent or my image of how the Egyptian state operates in the security realm wouldn't be all that different. That one of the fundamental problems is that what you have, I've often remarked about, if you look at Egyptian cabinet ministries, there's an odd feature of Egypt that I don't know any other country that does this. The Minister of Justice is always a judge, right? The Minister of Interior is always from the security apparatus. The Minister of Foreign Affairs is always a career diplomat. This has not always been historically the case in Egypt, but it's emerged that way. So what you have is a series of institutions that are really insulated from the political process. And they see themselves, each one of these, and I put the judiciary, the religious establishment, and above all, the presidency, as essentially seeing itself as above politics and properly not really accountable except to its own sense of mission. So you can get a security apparatus that to all observers looks like it's carrying out vendettas against it because it sees itself as the bulwark of stability in the regime, and it was being attacked, and it has to, and those people who attacked it were attacking the Egyptian state, and it has to defend itself and pay back. These are the sorts of things that can happen. Whether or not this is being micromanaged by the presidency or what Sisi's, what his state of mind in all this is, in a sense, I think a question that's difficult to answer, and I'm not sure it's all that much of a point in answering. The inclinations that we have is that there is a presidency that is at best coordinating, sometimes perhaps frustrated by some actions, but not really either able or interested to do the reconstruction of these key state institutions that would be necessary to function differently. If I could just make another point that I think is an important one on the issue of security, and it deals with Toma said about violence. And I think this is an absolutely critical point. No society is ever free of violence, and certainly never free of political violence, and Egypt wasn't either. But a lot of the political violence that took place in private, in torture in the past. Or those people who deployed violence often paid a political price. You look at, for instance, how much Mohamed Morsi and the presidency paid a high political price in November of 2012 when pro-Brotherhood, pro-presidency demonstrators beat up Morsi protesters. What is happening now that I see in Egypt is a little bit different. I mean, I think the 2011 period up to the present, the society went through a series of traumas that are seen very differently by different parts of the society. What happened in August of 2013? You hear very, very different versions, all about violence, but exactly who was doing what? Was it the Brotherhood being killed? Was it Christians being attacked? Well, of course, all these things happened. But you have a society from what I can see, in which various parts of it are not simply feel victimized, but also are blind, absolutely blind to trauma experienced by other parts of society. And I think that until that issue is fundamentally addressed, a real, I mean, maybe we do need a psychiatrist more than a political scientist, but until a real attempt is made to deal with that question, issues of reconciliation or of relaxation of the security mentality, this is really, if it's not a psychological process, at least one that has to be social and cultural and political, and not merely a tactic of suppressing through security measures those people who are held responsible for violence.
We have 20 or 25 minutes to bring the audience into this conversation.
Hello. Okay. My question is specifically for Dr. Brown. Following the Noor Party's support of the July 3rd coup, a lot of the writing around political Salafism in Egypt sort of forwarded the idea that they would try to seize the Muslim Brotherhood's position in Egyptian society, but would ultimately fail and fracture due to their organizational and ideological peculiarities. Could you comment on where politically active Salafists find themselves in the current situation in Egypt, and whether this model has held?
Okay, that's a good specific question about the Muslim Brotherhood, so I'm going to let Nathan Brown answer that before everyone else comes up with a succinct answer to the very large question, who governs Egypt?
Okay, yeah, on the Hizb ut-Noor, which is was one of the major, and was the largest Salafi political party, I think that answer is probably correct, that what they did back in June and July of 2013 was essentially sign on to the new political order, hoping precisely to occupy that political space and to protect some of the really impressive political gains that they had made in the previous 2 years. And all indications are that the party leadership has probably paid a fairly high price for that decision in terms of seeing to go so far down a path of compromise. Exactly how well they'll be able to perform in the election is, at this point, I think, a little bit unclear. There certainly have been complaints that that Salafi organizations have been coming under very, very severe pressure from the Ministry of Religious Affairs, and so on, and so that the space in which Salafism has operated and been able to build a base which was then translated into electoral strength by the Hizb ut-Noor may have dried up some. So I suspect what we will see is a political party that maintains existence but is simply much smaller and a much less impressive electoral performer than we saw back in 2011 and 2012.
Okay, on the question of who governs Egypt, Gameela, Ismail.
Well, it's a very difficult question, really. I mean, we question this every day. But definitely there is a clash or clashing powers and clashing organs that govern. And it becomes very evident with so many decisions being taken. And it shows very much how, for instance, one specific security organ can make a decision that's quite different than what the judiciary would do, and so forth. But what I'm sure of is that the final word is of the president.
Ibrahim?
I think the traditional answer will be the president, and he came after presidential elections and the revolution against the Muslim Brotherhood in 2013. But also I need to say that, of course, the president himself is mentioning many times that dealing with the bureaucracy in Egypt is very hectic and very, very tough. And he said that I never expected that to see the size of problems in the country that way. Because I'm dealing with the daily issues in Egypt and from Al-Ahram, and we everything is exposed to us in the newspapers, that I see that there is a very tough job for the government and for the president to deal with the bureaucracy. Bureaucracy in Egypt is really, this is the monster. The monster needs to be someone to control it, to have a real comprehensive project to reform the bureaucracy. This is something that touched the needs of people, touched the hopes of people to how to reform the country. This is when you see this, the president himself is dealing with some practical issues. Even when we talk about his, you remember his thesis in the War College in 2006, he mentioned that you can't build democracy in a country with low economic standard, or and he said that you need to do something to reform the economy, to stop the kind of chaos in the country. I think it's for him, it's he's focusing, as I said, in a practical way on how to manage the bureaucracy at this time, and maybe later on to see more initiatives and how to reform encourage maybe some initiatives. I can tell that there is some discussions and talks about how to get the components of the society together, civil society, political parties, and also media. And because it's, as I told you before the session, that we have a law that's organizing the public media and state-owned newspapers that might come before the elections, because it's, as I said, that maybe even in the president itself, they are not trusting the coming parliament because of this kind of personal interest in the parliament. This is what my take on this, the question of who governs Egypt. It's not easy, but I don't want to put everything in the basket of human rights and democracy, because there is a more open or general context that we need to talk about.
Sally Toma?
I think if you ask a taxi driver who governs Egypt, you'll get one of three answers. Either Allah, because we don't know, or it governs itself. I heard that a lot, that we are al-baraka. Al-baraka means as it goes, you know, it's always functioning for a specific reason for all these years, despite all. Or he'll say al-kubar, which is the big ones, okay? So I'll say it's the big ones, but I won't put it as in clashing between the big ones. I think it's a dance, it's not a clash. They step on each other's foot sometimes, but it is a dance. Because, you know, there are different aspects. If we say state security governs the people, you know, and all your liberties, then that's their, you know, area of expertise in a way. But then you have the military intelligence, and you have the general intelligence, and you have the president, and you have all this. And talking about economically who governs is a bit different. And I think it is a dance, and the media is involved most of the time. So now in Egypt we can tell media personnel, so who belongs to the military intelligence from the media people, who belongs to the general intelligence, who supports what, and every now and then we find the dance getting a bit hotter, you know, they're just clashing against each other till we know something is going to happen. So I think it will be the big sharks, yes, and they continue to be there dancing till we see. Sometimes it's not a happy one, and sometimes they get along well if there's a lot of resources for everyone and a big cake for everyone to eat from. So.
Nathan Brown, you'll be glad to know that I won't ask you to improve on that wonderful metaphor. I'll ask for other questions instead.
I finally got the microphone, and I see two major contradictions in what I'm hearing here. Number one, we talk about just using the language here, you know, about centers of power. We are talking about people getting elected because of certain socioeconomic forces. In many ways, that is the essence of politics in any country. And, but we call it names in a certain way. And if we add it to the underdevelopment of any country, can get that kind of a picture at the end. Second, I see, despite that it looks like there is a big opposition there in Egypt, but yet, operationally, everybody talk about that Sisi is supported, that Al-Kubar are supported, that, you know, Al-Kubar also is here in South Korea, in many other places. So, you know, how we can reconcile that? And I'm really surprised by, you know, how the youth movement in January, with all the talents and thinking that's included, we can't find any kind of self-evaluation of what went wrong. I mean, at the end, the whole thing was handed to the military or to the Muslim Brothers.
That's wrong.
And when they came to elections, the big ones got 1 seat. Al-Adl party got 1 seat, Al-Hurriya party got 1 seat. So are they the mainstream? Can we call that? Is the boycott is a solution or an escape? Because already, like many anarchists and many Marxists and many on the left in many countries are marginalized. So self-evaluation here require, if we take Orwellian literature, I think we should read Homage to Catalonia. It can tell you a lot about what's happening in Egypt. Thank you.
We hope to issue a reading list for all of you after this session. Please, Marina.
Hi, Marina Ottaway with the Wilson Center. I want to go back to your image of, you know, the monster, the terrorist monster and the dinosaur, and the population of Egypt caught in the middle. I think a lot of what's happening now and what's going to happen in the future depends on where the line between the monster and the population is drawn. Because it seems to me that there is a battle going on about who is a terrorist and who is not, who is a legitimate part of the society. It seems to me that the government is putting the line, including in the monster, a lot of people that most observers don't see, and I suspect most Egyptians don't see as monsters. I'd like to hear a bit more about this, because I think different parties, different groups put that line in a different place.
Okay, so this will probably be our last round of answers, so you can include here your forecast for where Egypt will be when we reconvene this session next year. The monster, are too many people being put in the category of monsters?
Yeah, that's true. But I'd like also to move
Please.
to Dr. Aman Said. Alhamdulillah salam. I know that he's been ill for quite a long time, so I'm glad to see him after all of this time. No, we do have self-evaluation, self-criticism. We know what went wrong. We were a group of parties that were established during or post the 25th of January. Young parties, big parties that had several thousands of members, all of them between the ages which I mentioned before. Very little finance. Parties that were born in the square, so moving the youth from the state of a revolution in the square and trying to put them on a political track needs a lot of inspiration and needs a lot of incentives and needs a lot of credibility and needs lots of justice and needs lots of guarantees that moving from this path to this path will help them genuinely build their country and have a better life. What happened from 2011 through the military council's rule and then through Mohamed Morsi's rule and then later on was constantly targeting these parties, constantly targeting those youth because they are not under control. The Muslim Brothers, all through their history before 2013, were another side of the coin. They always had their understanding with the regime. They always had the discourse and the dialogue that can take place with the military and with the police and with the state and with everyone. They were under control. We were not under control. And we are not under control. And this is very provocative for any authority. It started with President Morsi, even though he came out from a revolution stream. It happened with how the Muslim Brothers attacked us back when we wanted to reposition the trend and when we wanted to correct his path. And we were faced by the same methods that were used back during Mubarak and that were used during the military council from Morsi's rule. Passing all of these very difficult times until this minute with young men and women who are still in prison, who went out on the 25th of January and who also went out on the 30th of June. They are still in prison. We still have some of them. People were killed, as Sally was saying, lost their eyes, injured, forced to leave the country. All of these have very negative feelings against politics and against continuing to build their parties. I was the organization secretary back in 2013, assigned by Dr. Al-Baradei, and I remember that in 2013, we were able to have almost 7,000 members in the party, active members, who were paying regularly and who were very active. We had 118 headquarters. Today, we have close to 1,000 members, and we have only one headquarters, which we haven't paid its rent for the past 4 months. So I'm just giving you an idea that oppression and that injustice and that unfair decisions and that fighting and targeting the future, which is represented by the youth, which represents a big percentage of the Egyptian population, is not good at all. And it really takes them away and pushes them away from the political path and makes it very difficult for us as political parties, born after the revolution, to contain the anger and to move forward and try to start our campaigns towards the parliament. And I'm sure Dr. Saeed knows all this. I mean, he wasn't with 25th of January, but I'm sure he was following all of what was happening throughout the past period. The dinosaur is stepping on its own eggs and its own children, as I said in the beginning. And many are mistakenly put in prison, and many are mistakenly targeted, and many are mistakenly targeted by the media and by the judiciary.
Is that Ibrahim?
I need to comment on Dr. Abdulnam Saeed that I think last week I was struck by this on Facebook comment by one of these young revolutionaries. He said that we became a cult. He's talking about his friends, because he described it as people who's talking to each other, that we have their own closed circle, and they starting to isolate themselves from the society. I think this is quite, and I followed the discussions with his friends, and I found it really interesting to understand what's going on among these young people. They are not representing all young Egyptians, but at least these people who really participate in the revolutions since 2011. I think it's about time to ask those people to back again to politics, but I think it's about time to also to have a real civil society that based on more organized, that we have, for example, we don't have until now that civil society organization that deal with public policy in Egypt. This is, I think this is the need to discuss issues like that in a country like Egypt that on the way to, in its way to have a better economy. And also, I think it's encouraging those people to back to politics is also need some presidential initiatives to start to talk again to young people. There are a lot of initiatives now, one or two initiatives talking about this, how to build new leaders for Egypt, or to how to a program that will put in public, more qualified young Egyptians. I hope that we can increase the circle and put more people from different political shades that can benefit the country in the future. I think Egypt needs to move beyond ideology. We need to move beyond this talking about Muslim Brotherhood and military. It's not productive, and we will not gain a lot from this. So we need a real mature debate in the country.
I just want to say something about what went wrong. I think we've been doing nothing but self-evaluation for a long time. That actually we formed, it's a fun thing, but we formed some sort of talking groups among ourselves that we actually meet once a week to discuss what went wrong, just to know what happened, and we debate all sorts of stuff. I think one of the biggest mistakes was allowing the military council to convince the people or the square or whatever that it was about Mubarak. And because it was about Mubarak, it means, okay, so the revolution is successful, everything is happy, now everything is done, let's build. That's one of the mistakes. The other one was that we allowed the pact between the Muslim Brotherhood and the military to take place without us being involved in it. And we saw it, and it was clear that they were negotiating with our square to begin with, and we allowed that. And that was one of the mistakes that happened. The other mistake, which is a very important one, is that most of us are actually idealists or Puritans, if you might say. So we don't like to negotiate. We don't like to meet people. We don't like to play politics. And this is another mistake. We had to have different roles, but we didn't. All of us decided we're all going to be revolutionary. We're all going to be radical. We're all going to be this. And then we forgot the fact that we need policymakers, that we needed politicians, that we needed people, to speak at least and support what we were fighting for. So that also went wrong. So a lot of things went wrong. But on the other note, if we're talking about civil society here, Egypt had civil society forever, but it had a fake civil society. So it had a civil society that belonged to the regime. It was not real civil society, but it looked like it. Okay? And the idea is, are we really trying to build another fake civil society or real? If it's real, then how come we have a minister that is cracking down on all civil society, and we have a lot of NGOs problems going on? So it doesn't make sense when I find the regime saying we want civil society when you are cracking down on all the civil society that is available. I think there's also quite a danger here. If we're asking the young to participate or to change or so forth, now you have a terror act, and I've been threatened by the terror act actually for Facebook pages. Whatever you say on Facebook can be taken against you because you're inciting, if you're in opposition, then you are now threatened, by the terror act or the protest law, which is draconian, and so forth. So how do you want them to participate? I think the only thing we are trying to do now is actually survive this wave, survive this wave. outside of prison, you know, with least trauma as possible, but actually build ourselves and prepare the politicians that we want to see one day, you know. I think that's where Egypt is heading now. But to be honest, most of the Egyptians are under the age of 35. It's the majority, okay? You don't see them at elections polls, okay? But you see them still boycotting and still having this different dream that things are going to get better. They're struggling with their own frustration now, and that's what we have to deal with because we are a country in conflict, and we continue to be. So I think the only thing we can do now is just keep them alive, keep them happy, keep them fighting. I don't want to lose them to apathy, you know, like the rest of the world or the West or Europe or so forth. And that's the only thing we can do now, engage them in such a way. But just to say something that summarizes it all, the judiciary system. So in Minya, there was this clashes that happened anyway, and some 500 people were sentenced to death by a judge for killing one police officer. 500 people. One of them is Christian, and he was charged with being Muslim Brotherhood. One was dead, not even alive to be around, and the other one was on a wheelchair. And that's only 3 out of the 500. These are the mass sentences we have in Egypt. So how are we expecting anything if now judges and the judiciary system with the army, with the police, are on top of the heads of Egypt? They are the Basha of now. Long time ago, we had the aristocrats as Basha. Now we have these are the Basha, and we are again the people who are serving, you know, those we should be employing to serve us.
Nathan Brown, final thoughts.
Very quick comments, basically sort of affirming some of the things that were said by the other panelists. Number one, in terms of self-reflection, my impression when I talk to people who are involved in the events of 2011 is there's enormous amounts of self-reflection, too much, in fact. They're spending all their time, it's an unhealthy sign if they're spending all their time reflecting on the past rather than acting in the present. And the reason that's happening, I think, is because I'll put it very, very starkly. I think politics in Egypt is dead for now, and that's going to be very, very frustrating. But the second comment that I have is perhaps to end on a slightly different, perhaps optimistic note. When I went to Egypt in 2011, 2012, what really struck me was, again, an awful lot of youth energy, a lot of which was expressed in the political process, but a lot of which was expressed in other forms, cultural forms, absolutely, even sort of within institutions, within schools, universities, and so on. There was this real generational pressure. A lot of that has been blunted. But when I look at my own society, the United States, and I look at this America I was born into and the America that exists right now, it's fundamentally different in all kinds of ways, in its self-image, self-understanding, race relations, gender relations, and so on. A lot of that didn't take place through the political process. It took place essentially through generational change. If you take a look at the youth movement of the 1960s, it failed politically, but it had enormous social and cultural influence. Something of that sort may be happening in Egypt right now. We just don't know, and it's probably way too soon to judge. But there's an awful lot of energy within the society, which I think is not going to be visible if you focus only on the political process.
Thank you for giving us an optimistic note to end on. I'm awfully sorry to say we are already over time, and we could go much longer. Gameela, one sentence.
Yeah, one further on this optimistic final note. Is that yes, we do have in Egypt new underground music, new independent cinema, creativity of all sorts. And I just wanted to say to you all that Egypt is not all about, and Sinai is not all about terrorism against the military. No, we have a wonderful country that we would love you all to come and visit. And Sinai, believe me, we have the best beachfronts ever, underwater marine life ever, environment, nature, monuments, everything. So it's not what you see in the news. And there is a hashtag here which I would love you to see. This is Egypt, which if you go on, you will really see another picture of Egypt, another picture of Egypt.
One thing all friends of Egypt and the Egyptian people love about Egypt is their unquenchable optimism, even in the worst times. Please join me in thanking this very good panel.